I'm going to talk about my sister Sharon, and I'm glad to see you all here. Sharon Olson was born on May 10th, 1962, and died August 5th, 2022. She was Lois and Roland Olson's daughter, sister to 3 brothers and 3 sisters. When Sharon found a lump in her armpit in 2017, her doctor sent her for a mammogram. It took 2 weeks to get in, which found nothing. In fact, the mammogram report stated that her breasts were extremely dense. There was no evidence of malignancy. There was no change compared to her mammogram from 2013, and the mammogram was grossly unremarkable. Density was not something that Sharon had heard of before. She did not know that it could hide cancer in a mammogram and that it increased her risk of breast cancer. If she had known about the risks of dense breasts, she could have advocated for an ultrasound in those years when the cancer was starting and before it spread to her lymph nodes. Regular screening mammograms would have served no purpose. They didn't show anything. The subsequent ultrasound the same day as her mammogram found a large tumor in her left breast and cancer in her lymph nodes. Biopsies, bone scans, MRI, CT scans built her schedule. Chemo, radiation therapy, and surgery became hurdles to overcome. Because of the demands of her profession as a teacher, she took sick leave during her treatment and eventually retired after 28 years of teaching. And so life resumed. She was cancer-free. She moved to Weyburn to be near her parents to help and be helped. She bought a house with a dream art studio in it so she could paint. Her large canvases of the South Saskatchewan River from space were held in awe by her nieces and nephews. And her time was filled with taking courses from the University of Saskatchewan, encouraging and being encouraged by her church family, studying the stars and the planets in the sky, and watching tennis. But her most enduring task was to know and promote and inform of the dangers of dense breasts. She hadn't known. She didn't want others to be in the same position as she had been. Her posts on Facebook often asked, "Do you know if you're dense?" Sharon familiarized herself with the lack of direction from the Canadian Task Force of Preventive Medicine, who didn't advise warning women of their density or recommend ultrasounds unless there was a suspicion of cancer on the off chance it caused anxiety. This made her angry. How could a week or 2 of anxiety possibly compare to 64 plus weeks of treatment and then in the end, death? How could a task force override her right to be informed so she could take preventative action? In February of 2022, Sharon contracted COVID-19 and her health suffered. She had excruciating back pain and in her hips, and eventually went to the hospital many times where she was given prescriptions for pain medication. The thought occurred to us that maybe the cancer had metastasized to her bones, and in search of help, she traveled to the Regina General Hospital where she sat in emergency for over 48 hours before she was moved to a room. After many tests and scans, which could not pinpoint the cause of her pain, a scan was done of her head, and there it was, a tumor that caused the brain tissue to be squeezed out of the way with associated inflammation. We hoped the surgery would remove the tumor and relieve her worst pain symptoms, but it did not. Sharon was also having mobility issues, causing her legs to spasm, leading to falls, and because of this, it was evident to her oncologist that the breast cancer had metastasized to her brain and spread beyond the tumor to the lining around her brain and spinal column, and that further treatment, although not denied, could not be counted on to help. We made plans for end-of-life care, and her family gathered in love and support in this most painful time. Sharon's deepest hurt was the delay in providing necessary information about breast cancer to all, so that they would know the true risks to their health and what to do about it. In the past, I've received those letters from the screening program for breast cancer, and I'm grateful for the program, as I'm sure it has helped many. I was told I have dense breasts, but not what it meant, not a hint of the heightened risk, nor a link to an informational website. I also could have had mammograms that were grossly unremarkable that let me think I was fine. The wording is now more strongly worded, but it is still easy to overlook when one doesn't have the understanding. I realize we need to be our own advocates, but we cannot advocate for something we don't know. And people's doctors, if indeed they have a primary care physician, cannot advocate for their patients if they are not informed of the risks their patients with dense breasts face and understand the necessary screening that needs to be done. And that was what Sharon wanted, for women to know their risks. And in that she succeeded because information will be provided to women with dense breasts in the fall of 2023. But is it enough? We need to have more screening, to start screening earlier at 40 years of age, to advise every person of their breast density, whether they are dense or not, and what it means, and how the density affects their risk, so they too can share the knowledge. What a mammogram can and cannot show, and to include annual screening ultrasounds in addition to